Hugo, and I'm 14 years old. Tell me, have you ever wanted to have a big, full family? If you already have it, then you are very lucky. And if you don't, I'm sure you'll understand me well. My story began a year ago, but before I start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. For as long as I could remember, I'd only ever been raised by my father. I didn't know anything about my mother, not where she was, not even if she was alive. For some reason, there were no photos in our house, and my dad avoided all questions about her so stubbornly that I was a little worried something had happened to her. My dad was a good man, and I loved him very much. It's just that, to be honest, I wanted him to spend more time with me. He worked from very early in the morning until late at night each day, even on weekends. He also didn't approve of my interests at all. I was interested in Japan, watched a lot of anime, read manga, and even slowly started learning Japanese. It's quite a complicated language. Secretly, I was very proud of myself. However, my father thought it was all nonsense and that I would have been better off focusing on science just like him. Because of all of that, sometimes, especially in the evenings, I felt terribly lonely. I even asked my father permission to get a dog, but was refused once again. Dad said that a dog would destroy things in the house, and he absolutely didn't want that. Long story short, I was embarrassed to admit it, but I felt that there was something missing in my life. In secret, so not to offend my father, I dreamed of having a mother, and maybe even a brother or a sister. My quiet routine life changed very dramatically when my father was given an important project at work. He called me and told me that he would have to go to the other side of the world for a whole year, and he couldn't take me with him. I remember feeling terribly lost at that time. What was I supposed to do? I couldn't live all alone for a whole year, but my father surprised me. He said, "You're going to live with your mom in the meantime." I couldn't believe my ears. Seriously? I had a mother the whole time after all? But he hadn't said a word about her. At a complete loss, I didn't know whether to feel happy or angry. I couldn't even imagine what lay ahead. It turned out that my mother lived on the other side of the country. To move in with her, I had to leave absolutely everything behind. My school, classmates, friends, the studio where I was studying Japanese. So, even though I had wanted to meet my mom for so long, I hadn't been ready for such drastic changes in my life. And then, finally, I saw her. She gave me a very warm welcome and even cried with happiness. Her house was very small and cramped, but that wasn't the worst part. When I walked in, I was met by her new husband and also as many as 5 girls. The 2 younger ones turned out to be my half-sisters. All the 3 eldest were my stepfather's daughters. I was sort of happy to finally meet my family, but I was still shocked. Everything seemed so strange and alien to me. And then they showed me the room I was going to be living in. Having personal space was out of the question from that day on, because I shared a room with those 5 girls. As it turned out, my mom and dad had had a big fight right after I had been born. She'd wanted a big, close-knit family, and he wanted to focus on his career. Since dad was relentless and always got his way, after the divorce, I stayed with him, and my mom had to move to another city. Day by day, the joy of meeting with my new family gradually subsided. I missed my home, my friends, even my school. My mother was affectionate and kind, but she seemed like a complete stranger. The sisters were a different story altogether. The longer I lived with them, the more unbearable they seemed. All I could hear for days was stupid talk about makeup, boys, and Harry Styles, who they really liked. They took my things without asking. The room always reeked of creams and nail polish. The only time I got to be alone was when I was in the bathroom. And even then, not for very long, because a queue always quickly formed behind the door. I had never been so miserable. I didn't know what to talk about with my mother or my sisters. Even though I was constantly surrounded by people, I felt even lonelier than I had a couple months ago. In the end, I couldn't stand it any longer. I secretly packed all my things in a bag, saved up some money, and then, one night, quietly got out of the house and went to the station. I felt scared and was constantly looking around. When I tried to buy a bus ticket to my hometown, the cashier looked at me strangely, but still took the money. I was sitting at the bus stop, trembling with nerves and praying that the plan would work. Eventually, the bus I was waiting for drove out of the park. My heart leaped with joy. It could really work. I just needed to sit somewhere in the back and keep quiet. I remember getting up and taking a step towards the bus when someone suddenly put a heavy hand on my shoulder. Long story short, I didn't get to go anywhere. Cashier must have called the police as soon as she sold me that ticket. So they came, stopped me, and brought me back home. Surprisingly enough, my parents didn't even scold me. It was just that my mom looked so upset that I felt a little ashamed of myself. By the way, things weren't going great at school either. I wanted to go back to my father's too much, so I didn't even try to make friends. I just wandered through the hallways, sad and unhappy, until I met Izumi. She came to our school for a few months, straight from Japan as part of an exchange program, and she too seemed to feel out of place. As I later realized, she was an introvert and had a hard time getting along with people. Besides, her English wasn't great, so few people understood her. Surprisingly, Izumi and I got along like a house on fire. We chatted in Japanese, discussed video games and anime, did homework together. In just a few months, she became my best friend, so I was very sad to see her go back to Japan. Luckily, we kept in touch on the internet. We chatted on Discord and played Genshin Impact almost every evening. And then, you won't believe it, Izumi invited me to come visit her. However, I was very afraid to tell my mom about it. After all, I'd been dreaming of going to Japan my whole life, but I was sure my father would have never let me go. But Mom was ecstatic. She told me, "Of course you can go. You've been dreaming of this for so long." Well, that was weird. I wasn't used to such an attitude, but I didn't think about it long since I had to get ready for the trip. Japan was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. We walked a lot. She even showed me the beautiful center of Tokyo and even the cherry blossoms. That's when I realized why Izumi and I got along so well. She had to share a room with her 3 brothers. When I found out about it, I thought that my friend probably suffered a lot because of it. I even wanted to discuss the problem with her, but then I noticed that she wasn't troubled at all. Izumi was friends with her brothers. They had a whole bunch of common interests. They were really happy to spend time together, and oh, how I envied her. One day, when I couldn't stand it anymore, I decided to complain to Izumi. I said that I really envied her and also wanted to have such a friendly family. I thought that she would try to comfort me, but she suddenly looked at me very seriously and asked, "Hugo, have you ever tried to get to know your sisters better?" That question caught me off guard. I suddenly realized that I had never really been interested in my sisters' lives. I decided right from the start that they were stupid and dull and avoided them ever since. When I came home, what I saw at the airport surprised me. The whole family had come to meet me, and they all looked so happy, like they'd really missed me. My sisters and mom rushed to hug me, and for some reason, I remember very well the look of a boy passing by had given me. He was clearly envious of me. I decided to give my family a chance. I asked my sisters about their lives, stopped avoiding them, and tried to spend more time with them. And guess what? They were more interesting than I had expected. They didn't just talk about girly nonsense. I had simply never really listened to them. One of them loved anime, no less than I did. And my other sister played Genshin Impact as well. We even had the same favorite character, Diluc. Life slowly started to get better. The 6 of us shared one room, but I didn't see it as something terrible anymore. Mom always had time for each of us, and we talked a lot. She was interested in absolutely everything we liked. More than that, after she found out that I had long wanted a pet, she gave me rabbits as a birthday gift. They lived in a cage in the backyard. I kept feeling flabbergasted. My dad didn't let me get a dog even though we had lived in a huge house. And now, there were animals in our cramped home, but nothing bothered anyone. Everyone was perfectly happy. The remaining months flew by quickly, and a year passed. I grew very close to my sisters, my mom, even my stepdad. I'd almost forgotten that my father was coming back to take me away, so his arrival took me by surprise. My father's project at work was over, and he was ready to bring me home. But I suddenly remembered how little attention he had paid to me, how he had thrown me out to the other side of the country without asking for my opinion just because he'd got a cool job offer. Then I remembered how I loved and cared for my mom and how she made me feel during that year. And you know what? The choice was obvious. So I said I didn't want to go back home and would stay with my mom. My dad looked surprised and confused, but he didn't argue because I was already old enough to decide for myself. That's how the place I desperately wanted to run away from became the dearest place on earth for me. All I had to do was think a little less about myself and pay attention to the people around me. Izumi was right. If I hadn't listened to her advice, I wouldn't have known what my real family was.